Hi guys, I'm Danny Flex and welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut FLEXpectations. We're here every Thursday, 4:30 PM to look ahead to the boxing action over the weekend. And although I will talk about, there's three big shows this weekend and I will talk about all of them, I want to focus more in this episode on Billy Joe Saunders. He makes the latest defence of his WBO super middleweight title against Martin Murray, a previously four-time world title challenger. Unlucky in at least two of those challenges on Friday night, tomorrow night, on Sky Sports. And it's a fight that most people seem to think they already know the result of, let's be honest. Very few people outside of Murray's camp and fan base are picking him. And the vast majority who are picking Saunders are saying it'll be by decision rather than stoppage. Saunders not being a massive puncher and Murray being exceptionally tough. But this is the sort of fight which, without meaning to be disrespectful, has become indicative of Saunders' career, unfortunately. He's 31 years old, so it's by no means too late for things to change, but he's yet to have that top elite name on his record. He's got good wins, don't get me wrong. 2014, I was there, freezing cold night, as he beat Chris Eubank Jr., pipped him at the post in a thrilling fight when they were both at European level. I think it was for the British, Commonwealth and European titles at the XL. I remember not getting home till about 4 o'clock in the morning because of all the travel problems and getting to the car that was at the O2. But that's enough about me and my tribulations. But yeah, good win there, but again, only at European level. And following year, he won his first world title down at middleweight against Andy Lee. Very good fighter, Andy Lee, technically very sound, but didn't hold the title for long. Wouldn't call him an elite operator necessarily, and I mean that with the utmost respect to Andy Lee. But Saunders beat him fairly clearly. I think dropped him twice in the opening round and kind of kept in control from then on. And then 2017, which is the one most often cited, is that masterclass against David Lemieux. Now, a bit of a victim of circumstance in this, in that a lot of people compared it to Joe Calzaghe beating Jeff Lacey in terms of kind of a skillful British operator, decimating or exposing, maybe if it is a better word, a touted puncher from North America. Obviously, Lemieux's from Canada, Lacey's American. But there is a slight difference in that Calzaghe was the first to expose Jeff Lacey. He came with a lot of hype. He was an unbeaten IBF world champion. Lemieux came over as a former world champion who'd already been beaten at top level. So although it was seen by a lot of people as a 50-50 fight going in, he didn't have the hype and the credentials that Lacey came over with. And that's a little bit unfair because I think Saunders would have done a similar job if he'd have been the first person to defeat Lemieux. It just never happened at that time. And that just shows a kind of a bit of a victim of timing and circumstance in that one. But there's no getting away from the fact that apart from those three good wins, Saunders has never had a top level opponent or has one on his record. His world title wins have come against Andy Lee and then at super middle against Shifat Isufi, who was virtually unknown before the fight and has kind of faded back into obscurity since. It was at the Stevenage football stadium, so it was a bit of an occasion, but not a great opponent. And Saunders performed okay, not amazing. Pretty similar to his most recent fight on the Logan Paul KSI undercard in the US. I'm sure he got a hefty chunk of change for that, don't get me wrong, but his performance against Caceres until he got the knockout really late on, which is what champions are supposed to do, of course, wasn't particularly good. He didn't look at the races particularly for his high standards. And that makes his lack of elite competition all the more frustrating because it seems that the top fighters, or the best that he's faced at least, Andy Lee, Chris Eubank Jr. and David Lemieux, the ones who are perceived as being threats to his unbeaten record, are the ones that have brought the best out of him and have made him seem like an elite performer himself. Billy Joe Saunders on ability alone could be the number one pound-for-pound fighter in Britain. But on results and accomplishments and performances and quality of competition, all the things that I think pound-for-pound rankings should be based on, that's just my view, he struggles to get in the top five. You know, you look at Tyson Fury, who's got those landmark wins over Vladimir Klitschko and Deontay Wilder, of course. Look at Anthony Joshua, who beat a slightly more faded version of Klitschko, but has beaten a raft of decent heavyweights as well, and on big occasions. and that redemption win, of course, over Andy Ruiz, which is very impressive from a mental standpoint. Josh Taylor, still early in his pro career, as unified the super lightweight division. So, people like that. Josh Warrington's even got really good names on his record. And you look further down the list of your pound for pound, and yeah, Saunders would be fortunate to get in the top 5, unless it's based purely on skills, in which case he'd be vying for the top spot. So that makes it frustrating. As I say, he's 31. It's not too late. Joe Calzaghe got some elite type fights late in his career. He was underappreciated. And there are comparisons there. They're both very talented southpaws, both kind of underrated as they enter into their 30s, which is not uncommon. But I suppose the difference is that at this stage, Calzaghe had beaten the likes of Jeff Lacey, overrated as he was, and Mikhail Kessler, who went on to be even better. I think the Kessler win is probably Calzaghe's best, despite having bigger names on the record in Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. towards the end of their careers. Well, I say that, I think they both went on a bit longer than that, but towards the end of their careers at top level, at least. So there's similarities there, but Calzaghe had those big events. He had those, Millennium Stadium fight or Cardiff Castle fights, and he did fight good competition. And even then, he was criticised and not really revered until right at the end of his long tenure in the sport. So Billy Joe Saunders, still only 31, still unbeaten, still could have that elite fight. He turned down the Canelo fight, as we know, in the summer, after originally it was set for May. That fell through because of the pandemic, and then turned it down when it was going to be rearranged for the summer because he didn't have enough notice and he hadn't been in training camp because he was looking after elderly relatives who'd fallen ill with COVID. No shame in that, of course, no criticism attached to that. But he said recently on the conference call this week, in fact, that you can't get ready for an elite fight like Canelo at such short notice, which I understand, and he's probably right. But Callum Smith has taken it on relatively short notice, and Saunders criticised that decision. And again, it's all about opinions, and maybe he's right, and maybe Callum Smith will be in for a drubbing. But there is some sort of argument that you have to dare to be great at some point. Whether it's going up against an opponent outside of your weight class, whether it's fighting someone who's an overwhelming favourite to beat you, a feared puncher, or whether it's taking a fight at short notice, but you should still have that belief in yourself. You back yourself to have the talent, the game plan, the support network to be able to upset the odds. Now, I'm not saying he should have fought Canelo, but over the last, 5 years since he's been competing at the very top level, he won his first world title 2015, there should be at least one top marquee fight on that ledger, and there's not. And I think a lot of the blame for that, whether fair or otherwise, was attached to his former promoter, Frank Warren. When they split, it was like, well, finally Billy will get the big fights now, he's joining Matchroom. And I'm sure that seemed like a valid viewpoint at the time, with Canelo and Triple G both on DAZN, who are affiliated with Matchroom. It seemed like they'd be easier fights to make. But since being with Matchroom, I think he's fought Charles Adamu in a kind of tune-up fight. And then on that KSI bill, as I say, was very lucrative, but didn't do much to boost his standing in the sport or his legacy for when he retires. So, and that's not criticism of Matchroom. That's just saying that changing promoters isn't always the answer. Sometimes it comes down to the fighter to take the risk, take a shorter end of the purse, take shorter notice, whatever it might be, to secure those big fights that will enhance a legacy. Now, I'm not sure, to be honest, how much legacy in boxing means to Billy Joe Saunders. Having spoken to him a number of times, I think the main thing for him is to do the one thing that he feels he's really, really good at, which is boxing, and to make as much money as possible with as little kind of accumulative toll on his body as he can. And if that is the main goal, then he's doing brilliantly at it, and I don't knock him for it, because he's taken very few heavy shots, considering how long he's been a professional and an amateur, and an Olympian. And he's two-weight world champion. He's made a stack of cash, I'm sure. And he'd be set up for life, arguably, if he retired tomorrow. I don't know what his lifestyle's like. Maybe he's spending like there's no tomorrow, but I don't get the impression he's anything other than pretty careful with his money. So if that's his goal, then fair play to him. But from an observer standpoint and a boxing fan's standpoint, I'd really like to see him test himself. I'd really like to find out, and surely there's a part of him that would like to find out just how good he really is. Is he as good as he thinks he is? And the only way we'll find it out is if he fights the likes of Canelo, Triple G, Callum Smith, all those people in or around middleweights, the Charlos, in or around middleweight, super middleweight. Andrade, another one. Obviously, that fell through a couple of times. Once because of the drug testing issue with Saunders, which again is on him or his team. But we need to see those fights, and they get talked about every time he fights a Martin Murray or a Caceres. They get talked about in the build-up as, yeah, we'll get this one out of the way, then it'll be that. But it still hasn't happened. So I guess I'm frustrated. I'm not sure entirely where the blame lies, but I really want to see him get to that elite level and see if he can perform at it, and see if he's, if he's a two-weight world champion on merit rather than by virtue of circumstance and having the right opponents at the right times. Similar to Adrian Broner, who's a four-weight world champion, but, you struggle to name elite wins on his record as well. But I've spent a lot of time talking about Saunders. Let's move on a little bit now. And on that show, I think James Tennyson against the unbeaten Josh O'Reilly in a WBA lightweight eliminator could well steal the show. I think that's a really good fight. So I expect that to really deliver. Saunders Murray, I'm not going to say anything different from everyone else. I think Saunders wins by decision, but who knows? Martin Murray knows it's his last chance now. He's incredibly motivated, seems to have a bit of a chip on his shoulder about people not being particularly interested in him over the last couple of years, which, I can understand. All I can say is that I did approach him for an interview over a year ago now and got a similar response to the one he's been giving out this week leading up to the fight. So I guess he's felt the way he has kind of undervalued for a while now. And I don't blame him for it. I completely understand his viewpoint. But yeah, I do expect Saunders to win by decision in that one. Saturday night, because that's on Friday tomorrow. Saturday night, we see Frank Warren celebrate his 40 years in boxing. I think it was Tuesday when he hit that landmark, and they're having a bit of a party or a celebration in the Warren office today, I've been told. He promotes the big fight, British dust-up, Lyndon Arthur and Anthony Yarde. Arthur defending his Commonwealth super middleweight title, but it's about light heavyweight title. But it's about a lot more than that. Yarde looking to get back onto the world scene after that brave but ultimately fruitless fight with Sergei Kovalev, and Arthur looking to leapfrog him and take his place at the top table, if you like, and that higher WBO rankings for both of them, but Yarde's, I believe, is higher. Really interesting fight. Yarde, muscular puncher, but clever as well, sets his shots up, disguises them, good head movement, quite slick. But then you've got Lyndon Arthur, tall, rangy, great jab, can box on his toes, but has a bit of a dig himself as well. He's dangerous puncher as well as everything else, and seems really motivated going into this fight. Very little pressure on him as well. So yeah, that's a really, really good main event. Not loads on the undercard, I've got to say, but Willie Hutchinson obviously dropped off with the flu. He was supposed to be fighting for the British title against Lennox Clark, so that's disappointing. But I'd say a possible below the radar cracker is Chris Bourke, the Southern Area champion at Super Bantam, against Michael Ramabaleza, the English champion. They're fighting for some WBC fringe title, but all that aside, should be a really, really good contest. Ramabaleza, a very underrated performer, really nice guy as well. Check out the interview I did with him before their fight was first scheduled, before someone in his team contracted COVID and caused a postponement. Have a look at that. But yeah, really nice guy. Chris Bourke's a lovely guy as well. Both great guys. But I think their styles will gel pretty well, and it'll be a really interesting fight on Saturday night. And then in the early hours of Sunday morning for UK viewers, Saturday night closer to prime time for our US cousins, we've got a more intriguing fight than the others put together, I'd say, in that Errol Spence Jr. returns for the first time since that horrific car crash where he flipped his sports car at very, very high speeds. It looked from the video footage that he was lucky to be alive, but came out with mainly just scratches and bruises, and seems, for all intents and purposes, the noises coming out the camp and the stuff that he's saying, back to 100%. Will not truly know. He'll not truly know until he gets in the ring And he's credit to him, he's not taken an easy mark in Danny Garcia, former world champion, never gives anyone an easy fight, never been beaten conclusively. You know, all his defeats have been very, very close, at least 2 of them debatable as well. So, incredibly interesting fight. Would be quite an interesting fight, regardless of the accident and the fact that Spence hasn't fought since. But that adds an extra element that makes it even more intriguing. So, looking forward to watching that. I believe it's on Box Nation. I think I saw something on Twitter saying it's on Box Nation. If it's on another channel, I apologise in advance to whoever I've offended. But it's certainly on UK TV, so if you get a chance, make sure you watch it, or like me, record it and watch it the next day, because I don't get up at that sort of time anymore. I haven't done for a number of years. But yeah, excellent fight, and always great to see Spence back in action not long after his big rival, Terence Crawford, looked great against Kell Brook. So that's all I've got to say. Let me know what fight you're most looking forward to this weekend. But mostly, because I spent most of my time talking about it, let me know what you think about Billy Joe Saunders, his career trajectory, and where he goes from here, and whether you think he can still compete and succeed at top world level. As always, I really appreciate your time. I'll be back on Monday for reflections, looking back at all these shows at 4:30 p.m. And then next week, Thursday, same time, for the next FLEXpectations, which will look ahead, of course, to Anthony Joshua against Kubrat Pulev. Thanks very much, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.